Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. I'll show you what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow today. So relaxing as per usual. Happy Good Friday, I suppose, to everyone. As yeah, it's like some public holidays here in the UK. Today, tomorrow, well, I mean, weekend's always kind of a holiday, but Monday as well, for Easter bank holidays. But for whatever reason, in the UK, we have many bank holidays in April and May, sort of time, springtime. Because we have two more, I think, coming in May, like one at the start and one at the end, which is kind of wild, but hey ho. Good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 9:12 PM on Friday, April 3rd, 2026. So yeah, what happened today? Today's been relatively chill, like nothing crazy, except, well, I mean, but the big thing is I had a D&D session today, because of course it's the bank holiday, well, free in the afternoon, so I was like, why don't we do it in the afternoon time instead of in evening time, because the evening time is usually time spent for drawing club, which I'll be joining into after I record this thing. Like I could have spent this morning as well recording more dazzling videos, and I didn't. I will say though, I did finish off Ball or Porcupine, which I'm not going to talk about today. I guess I'll talk about tomorrow. Mainly because I want to talk about D&D today, because whoa, it's cool stuff. It's kind of wild, I would say. Because I would say that this session, more than any, has been one of my more self-indulgent sessions, I think, of anything. Not to say that I did it, well, I didn't do it with the intention of going against, like, my players or at the expense of my players, but it's sort of like, you know, I often talk about this, like, as a DM, it's really hard because you write, like, this crazy, well, at least on my case, because I'm quite, like, a lore-driven, story-driven, character-driven DM. You write all this story, all these interweaving plots, you spend hours, days, weeks, months planning some of these out. Some things are just like, you're like laying little seeds of foundation, you see an opportunity to do a little bit of foreshadowing, and you're like, ooh, just sprinkle something there. It's actually kind of crazy sometimes as a DM, because you do it and then you don't get the chance really to tell anyone about it, because at least in my case, nearly all my friends who know about D&D and stuff are in the campaign. So it's like, who can I talk to about this story? And I'm like, well, I can't. It's just to myself. But, you know, you get a reward from seeing your players discover the story, seeing your players interact with it in one way or another, seeing your players outsmart you. That's why I say as a DM, like, when my players come up with something clever and I go, I didn't think of that, that is a good question. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. And when I see a moment to, like, sow some seeds of doubt, sow some questions, when I see them discuss something which they think is going on, I'm just like, yes. Like, I say this all the time. Like, seeing my players like engage with the world in one way or another is by far and away the most satisfying thing of being a DM for me. Because if my players were not engaged, no way would I have kept it on for this long. It is genuinely very exhausting to do so. But I guess it keeps me busy in certain ways. So why not? But today's session was much more a payoff for me, because basically they had an arc ending fight last session where basically they rounded off something, and now we're sort of like in a epilogue of this act. I'm not exactly sure what direction they want to go in the next act. They don't have to go in the direction which I've given to them. But essentially, the initial idea I had is that basically we'd have story arcs focusing on each of the characters, essentially. It hasn't really transpired like that, and I realised as I DM more about that's not the way to do it. Like, definitely, like, the first act you should go through should be irrespective of the characters, which is what I did. The first act was basically completely irrelevant to the characters. It's more like setting the foundations for what will be the greater plot that main plot that they end up chasing together. And then the second act was both campaigns, because I'm running two campaigns, were meant to focus on one of the characters. But then it ended up transpiring, and, you know, it ended up being like a much bigger thing than I expected. So I was like, that's totally fair. So then what I ended up doing is I ended up interweaving the other characters' stories into this character's story. Not by overlapping, but by braiding the story together. So, for example, one of the characters has, like, let's say, a bad relationship with some of their family, and then instead of being like hunting out their family, the family came to them, which is how they ended up seeing a lot of their family members. One of their family members was also over here. And it helped resolve that way, because then the great thing about doing that is that you can progress multiple story arcs at the same time for the characters without having it to be like, oh, it's my character, like, I'm playing a character, my character's arc is going to be the last one in the group. I have to basically wait like 3 years of story, and then I can focus on my character's story. Now everyone can basically focus on their story at like, they basically take turns much more frequently, even though the overall backbone structure is more from one character's story. Which plays well with the characters I have, because only one character has a particularly location-sensitive backstory. The others are all more like general plot point stories, which are easier to move around, I suppose. So yeah, but this one is more of an arc ender because it's sort of ending like one of the character's story arcs. Kind of. Obviously, they've discovered other things along the way, but this is like the main premise of the story arc. Was essentially this demon and a curse, and they want to kill the demon essentially to try and uplift the curse. Long story short, they actually kind of really got rid of kind of a curse, and they killed the demon in the last session after some great preparation, good fight, and I spoke up a little bit about it last time. But this session was basically the epilogue, the aftermath of that, because obviously you can't just kill like one of the greater demons essentially and be like, oh, there's no consequence for this. What does this mean? It's basically with the aim of trying to get them to it's twofold. One, to answer some more questions from them, which they've like had about the lore and the story. Whether they care about it or not, I don't know. It's kind of up to them, I suppose. But I'm pretty sure I do. This group is pretty engaged with the lore, more so. And then, not to say that the other group isn't as well, but I would say the other group, it's 50-50 of the players. And yeah, it's also to give them some sort of thoughts about like what could they start doing next. I know they have an overall goal, but it doesn't mean they have to achieve it just like that. So it was very interesting planning this session, because I was like, okay, thankfully in this case I have a DMPC, so it's actually a lot easier to prod things sometimes as a DMPC, because then you can kind of ask things in character to help them get them thinking about things. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I just say stuff for roleplay purposes as well, because go on, it's fun. It's fun to have this PC dynamic, but I never want my PC to overshadow their PCs. It's their story. My DMPC is just like an accompaniment to them, is how I think about it. But this is like the rare exception, and that's why I say it's a bit self-indulgent, because this is more my DMPC's plot. My DMPC has an optional story arc, essentially. Something which can be intertwined, and something which I, as I now know, basically interwoven into the main story plot. That way it's sort of a thing where it's like, it doesn't feel like a waste of time chasing it, because it still progresses the main story, but also at the same time, it's like, if they don't do it, then that's fine. Like, they don't have to do this, because they can still progress in the main plot otherwise. That's a general idea behind it. And so basically this main story is that the DMPC is in some way tied together with this demon plot going on. And there was a lot of different iterations I came up with when I was planning out the DMPC of what would work, but this is the one I ended up settling on. And basically this session was that reveal, because the DMPC didn't know either. So there were like little tidbits sort of like left here and there, which started which started sort of like blooming here, essentially, because there are a lot of things which, you know, there's some like long reaching foreshadowing you do, and there's some like much more short term foreshadowing, because I also think it's a bit unfair to be like, hey players, remember literally everything which happens. You know, sometimes I'll be saying something and it'll be an unimportant detail, and sometimes I'll be saying something and I'll be, oh, this is foreshadowing for something which won't pay off until a year and a half. So it's a bit unfair to be like my players to expect that. But you can certainly start pointing out things which are weird, you know. Start making and subvert their expectations in one way or another. And if they did ask about it, then it would be something that I would have answered. So basically, this is a big sort of payoff my end, being like, okay, I'm going to put together all these weird things through the DMPC, with them basically being like, it doesn't make sense. Or, oh, it doesn't make sense. Why does this happen? This shouldn't happen this way because of XYZ reason. So why did it happen like that, essentially? And then they just sort of ruminate on it for a while. And there was a lot of little random things which came together. Some things, again, they didn't ask on. One being about the process of the actual ritual. And it's long story short, they basically did a ritual to trick the demon into staying there and then fought the demon from it. One about being like the details of a ritual. Like if they asked about that, they would have got some like foreshadowed hints, but they didn't, which is totally fair, because how do you think about something like that? It's easy for me to think about because I know what the lore is, but they also might not care, and also their character might not care. So, you know, there's always a thing about like, do you want to do it, or do the character even want to do it? How strictly you stay with that, that's up to you, to be honest. But It's neither here nor there. But there's other things as well, like things which had been much more sort of like long running, when I introduced this concept of like soul stones essentially, and then, you know, the introduction of the DM PC's character lore. Basically, they're like a battlesmith artificer, and then being like, oh, their battlesmith, the battle robot thing, also has like a thing which is kind of like a soulstone, and then the DMPC going like, no, it's totally different. This is more like a projection of things, and then getting them being very defensive about the entire thing, which is a little bit strange. And then you get some much more like shorter scale foreshadowing things where the DMPC, you know, and they all sort of agree that basically when they kill this demon, they're expecting a huge magical explosion to happen, like a sudden release of a lot of magical energy. But then it didn't. Like, once it happened, it like, sure, there was a magical release, but it wasn't absolutely devastating. Like, what does that mean? Things that sort of get them, you know, thinking. Because I think the easy part is being like, what is exactly wrong? And it's much harder to string everything together. Because for one, my players, again, are keeping track of, like, a lot of different things. Not to say that I'm also not keeping track of a lot of different things, but it's easier from my perspective because I know how they link behind the scenes. It's a lot harder to make sort of leaps and jumps, especially when they don't know the intricacies of how, like, magic necessarily works in this world. That's something they slowly have to discover. So I think it is a nice sort of thing where this DMPC is basically someone who is like an academic, who knows about magic and stuff. Because it gives a situation where it's like, yeah, they're like, well, if you're interested in knowing, well, you had to ask an expert. But if you're like, well, none of our players wanted to play someone who was like a arcane expert or something, you know, then what do? Well, that's okay. Now you have it. I mean, she's effectively just a glamorized NPC, right? She's a glamorized NPC who just sort of travels with him, and then they could be like, hey, what's up with this? So yeah, there was a moment basically which was like almost like a cutscene I prepared, where it's basically like this DMPC puts everything together. Now, if one of my players wanted to do it, like they put it all together, I'd be like, one, astonished, because that's insane. How did you do that? Because you found out about some of this information in this session. Like, if you managed to put it together on the spot, I would be like, what? To be fair, my players have put a lot of things together. Sometimes, you know, pretty quickly on the spot. Sometimes they realise it earlier or something. So sometimes they're like, oh, I already knew. Which I will say. Please tell me if you already know, so then I can share in the excitement. But yeah. That's why it was like a very cathartic thing for me to be like, okay, you know, here's all the things, like now I can reveal more about the lore. You basically had to listen to like my sort of, not rant, but sort of like the descriptor of like how the magic works in this world to a certain degree, and why things are the way they are. Because, well, I mean, that's what I spent a lot of time, you know, thinking about and preparing. So this was basically a lore dump. That's why it was so like I was gonna say self-effacing, that's not the right word. Like, self-indulgent, you know? To basically be able to talk about something which I spent so long preparing and thinking about, and then finally get to reveal the entire thing. There was even, like, another, like, very medium level, revelation was the fact that this DMPC basically had, like, a mentor. Back in the day, which she brought up like very, very slightly in passing once she was talking about a backstory, but the bigger backstory focus was on something else. And then when we have a joint session, I basically made rooms for everyone's backstories. Well, actually, technically it wasn't backstories, it was more like alternate futures of what could have been. Had something in their life gone differently. But yeah. And then one I did for my own DMPC was basically like, what if the tragic thing didn't happen and they were still working together with a mentor? So the mentor appeared for a little bit, in case people wanted to ask like about who that was or something later on. But I very much skipped through it because I remember we were getting like we spent a long time on the joint session. I was like, okay, this part's about a DMPC, so you know I'm not gonna hang around for too long. Obviously, would it have been longer if I Could I have made it longer? Yes, absolutely. But at the time I was like, no, let's focus on the PCs because we're running out of time. Bam, 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 done. And then had we asked about the name, we would have found out about the initials, and the initials which were later found in the research notes. So that's what makes it so fun. But yes. That's why it's self-indulgent, that's why it's fun. It's like basically monologuing of how exactly the world works. But yeah. What else can I say about it? I don't really know, to be honest. There's more I want to say about it, obviously, like all the time, the stuff I want to say. I mean, it's getting to a point where I probably can have much more open discussions about the lore with that campaign, because they found out like a lot of things. They haven't found out everything, mind you, because, I mean, if they found out about everything, then what's the point of doing level 1 to level 20? But they certainly found out about a lot, is what I'd say. So yeah. Will I don't know. Maybe they'll, like, we have joked that the talk back for this campaign is going to be so much fun, probably. Well, at least for me. I don't know if it's going to be that fun for anyone else, but allow me to be self-indulgent, allow me to take pride in something that I've created. And then allow me to also take pride in something which was collaboratively created as well. What I mean to say is, like, allow me that level of I was going to say actualization, that's not the word. Of arrogance, I suppose. And self-indulgence. It's tough holding on to D&D secrets like this for years at a time, you know. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of the ultimate goal of a DM, right? You want everyone to uncover the secrets, right? I'd imagine that's kind of a goal for like a lot of creators, like authors, etc., right? You want people to find out what the story is. You want people to put it together. Like, what's the fun in basically going like, tee-hee, you'll never know for the rest of time. You can instead go, tee-hee, here you go. Right? But even better than tee-hee, here you go is tee-hee. Is when you go tee-hee, and then the players go, here you go. And I'm like, whoa. That's what makes it so fantastic. But yeah, so it was basically a very self-indulgent session, I think. Well, from my perspective, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't come across as self-indulgent. I felt like I was being so self-indulgent during it, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with this. Just like, I don't know. I think it was a fun moment to just try and be like, hey, well, this is why it's so weird, you know, why didn't it work like this? And when I was thinking about it, and did you notice during this part that something like this was happening? And then because of this, I was thinking about that a little bit more. And then basically been going on a rant, which very much had to be well prepared, I suppose. That entire thing. And like I put out like bullet point notes of the exact points I needed to bring up and talk about, because I was like, if I don't, then I'm going to forget something and it's going to be a real pain. It's like it's tough to do what I wanted to do cinematically, which is like, you know, the genius sort of like the genius spiel of like spilling everything out, putting the links together and stuff like that, explaining it to the others. Which is kind of cheating when you're the DM, because of course you have all the secrets in the first place, but, you know, again, allow me a moment of arrogance to do so. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to round this episode off here. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. There we go. Bye-bye for now.